The first thing the rescue volunteers noticed was not the frozen motorcycles parked along the roadside. It was the old woman standing on her front porch with a weathered blanket wrapped around her shoulders, calmly waving 6 enormous bikers toward her tiny farmhouse while every other house on the road had locked its doors. By sunrise, that simple act of mercy would uncover a truth that no one in the county had imagined, leaving hardened men in tears and an entire town questioning everything they thought they knew about kindness. If you believe kindness can change lives, forgiveness can heal old wounds, and second chances still matter in this world, please take a moment to like this video, leave a thoughtful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel. Every act of support helps our community continue sharing stories that remind us humanity is stronger than fear. Marlene Whitaker had spent nearly 40 years living alone in a weathered farmhouse nestled beside an old country highway that cut through endless pine forests. At 79 years old, her hands were crooked from arthritis, her back ached with every step, and her eyesight had faded enough that she needed thick glasses simply to thread a needle. Yet the people who knew her best often said her heart had only grown stronger with age. She believed that every stranger carried a story hidden beneath the surface, and every person deserved to be treated with dignity before judgment. Life had taught her painful lessons. She had buried her husband nearly 20 years earlier, watched neighbors move away one by one, and endured lonely holidays with nothing but fading photographs and treasured memories. Still, she refused to let bitterness settle inside her. Every morning she baked fresh bread, filled a kettle with soup, and kept extra blankets neatly folded near the front door, convinced that someday someone would need them. That bitter winter afternoon, the weather changed with frightening speed. Bright daylight disappeared behind thick gray clouds as fierce winds swept snow across the highway. Visibility shrank until even nearby trees vanished behind swirling white curtains. Emergency warnings urged travelers to stay off the roads, but many were already trapped between towns with nowhere safe to stop. Marlene watched from her living room window as abandoned cars slowly disappeared beneath drifting snow. She whispered a quiet prayer for every family stranded outside, knowing how quickly freezing temperatures could become deadly. Not long afterward, the distant rumble of motorcycle engines echoed faintly through the storm before falling silent. Curious, Marlene stepped carefully onto her porch and noticed 6 large touring motorcycles parked near the edge of her property. Their riders struggled through knee-deep snow, exhausted and barely able to keep their balance. Heavy leather jackets, patched vests, frost-covered beards, and weary eyes made them appear intimidating to anyone who saw them. Their club insignias identified them as members of the Hells Angels, a sight that would have sent most people rushing indoors to lock every door. Several nearby residents watched from behind curtains. One neighbor even shouted from across the road that she should call the sheriff instead of inviting trouble onto her property. Others shook their heads, convinced the elderly widow had finally lost her judgment. But Marlene saw something different. She saw men whose hands trembled from cold, whose faces revealed exhaustion instead of aggression, and whose determination to protect one another reminded her of soldiers returning from difficult battles. Without hesitation, she opened her front door wider and motioned for them to come inside before the storm claimed their lives. The men hesitated. Their leader, a broad-shouldered rider named Garrett Hale, looked almost embarrassed by the invitation. Pride made accepting help difficult, especially from someone old enough to be his grandmother. Yet the freezing wind removed any remaining doubt. One by one, they stepped into the warm farmhouse, removing snow-covered gloves and boots while apologizing for bringing ice and mud across her wooden floors. The tiny home suddenly felt alive again. Steam rose from soaked jackets drying beside the fireplace. Marlene served bowls of homemade vegetable soup, fresh bread still warm from the oven, hot coffee, and slices of apple pie she had baked that morning. The bikers ate quietly at first, overwhelmed less by the food than by the unexpected kindness. They had grown accustomed to suspicious stares, denied service, and assumptions made before anyone learned their names. Sitting around that humble kitchen table reminded them of homes they had not visited in years. As daylight continued outside, conversation slowly replaced silence. Marlene discovered Garrett had once worked as a paramedic before personal tragedy pushed him into years of isolation. Another rider, Colton Briggs, quietly admitted he volunteered every weekend repairing playground equipment for children whose schools could not afford maintenance. Rowan Mercer spent much of each summer organizing charity rides benefiting veterans with life-changing injuries. Finn Archer had become the legal guardian of his younger sister after their parents passed away, sacrificing his own dreams to keep their family together. Each story challenged the frightening image their appearance projected. Meanwhile, rumors spread rapidly through town. Residents assumed Marlene had endangered herself. Some even gathered near the property from a safe distance, watching anxiously through binoculars, expecting flashing police lights or some violent confrontation. Instead, all they witnessed were 6 intimidating bikers carefully chopping firewood, clearing snow from the elderly woman's porch, repairing loose fence posts, fixing broken gutters, and carrying heavy supplies she had struggled to move for months. By late afternoon her neglected property looked better than it had in years. Inside the farmhouse, Marlene quietly admitted she had been struggling financially since unexpected medical bills consumed much of her savings. She never complained because she believed others faced even greater hardships. Garrett noticed the old furnace rattled dangerously whenever it turned on. Cold air slipped through cracked window frames. The roof leaked in several places despite buckets carefully positioned beneath the worst drips. Every member of the group exchanged silent glances. None of them spoke about helping because they had already decided. Before leaving after the storm finally weakened enough for safe travel during the late afternoon, Garrett politely thanked Marlene for treating them like human beings instead of frightening headlines. She smiled gently and reminded them that kindness only mattered when it was given without expecting anything in return. They departed quietly, leaving behind sincere gratitude and footprints disappearing beneath fresh snow. The next morning, bright winter sunlight reflected brilliantly across fields blanketed in fresh snow. Marlene awoke expecting another peaceful day of solitude. Instead, the distant sound of engines filled the crisp morning air. She looked outside and froze in disbelief. Dozens upon dozens of motorcycles rolled slowly onto her property. Pickup trucks followed carrying lumber, roofing materials, windows, insulation, heating equipment, groceries, furniture, and trailers loaded with tools. The 6 riders she had welcomed the previous day had returned, bringing nearly an entire community with them. Word had spread throughout their riding network about the elderly widow who had opened her home when others turned them away. Riders traveled from neighboring counties, bringing carpenters, electricians, plumbers, mechanics, nurses, and volunteers eager to repay a debt impossible to measure in dollars. Nobody waited for permission. Everyone simply started working. Some repaired the roof before melting snow caused further damage. Others replaced broken windows, installed proper insulation, serviced the aging furnace, strengthened the porch, painted peeling walls, repaired plumbing, and rebuilt unsafe steps leading to the entrance. Volunteers stocked her pantry with months of groceries, filled her medicine cabinet with essential supplies, and even constructed raised garden beds so she could continue growing vegetables without straining her back. The townspeople watched in stunned silence. Their expectations of chaos had transformed into something almost impossible to comprehend. The same men they had feared were laughing with local children while building birdhouses, helping elderly neighbors shovel driveways, and refusing payment for every hour they worked. Suspicion slowly gave way to curiosity. Curiosity became conversation. Conversation gradually turned into understanding. One resident named Eleanor Brooks carried over homemade cookies, uncertain how she would be received. Garrett accepted them with genuine appreciation before introducing her to every volunteer by name. Soon other neighbors followed. Coffee was shared. Stories replaced assumptions. Barriers built over decades quietly began falling apart beneath the warmth of simple human connection. Later that afternoon, while organizing old boxes inside the farmhouse attic, one volunteer discovered a faded military photograph tucked inside an aging wooden frame. Garrett studied the picture and immediately recognized the uniform worn by Marlene's late husband, Thomas Whitaker. Years earlier, Garrett's own grandfather had often spoken about a courageous soldier named Thomas who risked his life repeatedly to rescue wounded comrades during a dangerous mission overseas. After returning home, Thomas rarely discussed the war, believing true courage required no applause. Garrett gently asked Marlene about the photograph. She smiled softly while brushing dust from the frame. She explained that Thomas always believed helping strangers without asking questions was the highest form of honor because someone had once saved his life without knowing his name. That lesson became the foundation of their marriage and eventually guided every decision she made, including opening her door during the storm. Tears quietly formed in Garrett's eyes as he realized the kindness shown to him had been passed forward across generations. Before the volunteers prepared to leave, the town mayor unexpectedly arrived carrying an official proclamation recognizing everyone who had contributed to restoring Marlene's home. He admitted publicly that the community had judged the riders unfairly before witnessing their compassion firsthand. His words were humble, sincere, and long overdue. Applause echoed across the snowy property as neighbors stood beside bikers without fear, united by a lesson none of them would forget. Marlene looked around at the repaired farmhouse, the smiling faces, and the countless people embracing one another despite arriving as complete strangers only a day earlier. She realized the greatest gift had never been the new roof, warm furnace, or stocked pantry. It was watching fear transformed into friendship and prejudice replaced by understanding. Her lonely house had become a place where broken assumptions were rebuilt into lasting relationships. As the motorcycles prepared to depart beneath the bright afternoon sun, each rider paused long enough to hug the woman they affectionately began calling Grandma Marlene. She reminded every one of them to drive safely, stay warm, and never believe they were beyond redemption simply because the world expected the worst from them. Many of those tough men struggled to hide tears as they waved goodbye, carrying with them a renewed belief that compassion could still exist in unexpected places. Before this story comes to an end, we'd love to hear from you. Please leave a meaningful comment sharing whether you believe one act of kindness can completely change someone's life, or tell us about a moment when compassion surprised you in the most unexpected way. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Long after the snow melted and spring covered the countryside with green fields once again, travelers passing Marlene's farmhouse noticed something remarkable. The porch was always swept clean, fresh bread often cooled on the windowsill, and a small wooden sign hung beside the front door. It carried only a few simple words that perfectly captured everything that had happened there: everyone arrives as a stranger. Everyone deserves the chance to leave as family. And for everyone who heard the story, those words became a quiet reminder that the strongest walls are not built from wood or stone, but from fear, while the strongest bridges are built by ordinary people brave enough to open a single door.